G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a little video about some of the ways of cleaning your rifle. Comes up with a few details, but largely it's in reference to start off with, people who want to clean their barrels properly. People do a lot of cleaning. I don't do a lot of cleaning of a centerfire rifle. I basically run what I call equilibrium, but largely I do a lot of not cleaning that much, and I don't shoot rifles that much. I don't do thousands of rounds through a particular rifle. I use all sorts of rifles. I'm shooting all the time, but with only a small amount of rounds through any particular rifle at any particular time. But largely I don't clean too much, so not a huge issue for me, but still something I deal with a little bit. But what I'm actually talking to here is sometimes when I talk about raising your butt pad height up to get a nice straight line of push, or to do with setting up the back of the rifle, and how actually important that is for the overall attitude of the rifle, and where one of the places that I definitely find accuracy. For many, many years I've said that I don't do much in the way of load development, I make the rifle shoot. Now that's a little bit to do with the human, it's a lot to do with setting up the rifle to make sure it performs consistently all the time. And then I find that is the key ingredient to the best shooting. Load development is something for some people. I don't do much of it. I do the very bare minimum of it, where I run pressures and everything else is very consistent, but I don't chase it too much more than that. I find setting up the rifle is important. So that's why I do tend to lean on both from good muzzle brakes to good chassis, butt pad height, very, very important to stop the rifle from moving up, make sure it goes straight forward and back. But I quite commonly get this comment, and that is when it's not movable, and all things, this is movable, this is one that I can move it out of the road, this is a rifle that you could do that, but this is the GRS stock, this can move as well. So yes, it's things that this one's adjustable, but we're talking about when it's not adjustable. How do you do the proper cleaning? Now for me, I do something when I just want to put something through the barrel, then I do it a couple of ways. Both of them are something you do with care, and not something that I would recommend, or a gunsmith would recommend at all, but done with care you can do it properly. And that is either, we'll lift the bolt here, that is either I can just get around it where I can put this through here, and then I can hold with the right bit of pressure, I can hold where I get a slight bow through this just to be able to push it up there and wipe it back down. So I just make sure with a bit of care, and it's got to be everything in the right place, so I can then do that without rubbing the steel against anything, just by putting a little bit of pressure with my hand and twisting a little bit so I can go up and back as to just make sure I get the dust out of it, or do a wipe over at the end, just clean the loose carbon off, that type of thing. That's one thing I will do. A lot of care is involved with that. I stress, if you're trying to get around and bend this shaft at all, it's not for scrubbing, that type of thing. It's just so you can carefully do it from the chamber and doing it that stuff. But the other thing I do, which is even worse than that, and this is certainly not what any gunsmith or anyone would recommend, but it does work, and that is I remove the wipe I'm going to put through. I very, very carefully slide the pull through down there, the rod through there, then I put in, then down this end I screw in the patch or the mop with a little bit of oil on it, or dry, or however I'm using it. So I pull it through there, and then I simply pull it back through. So that gives me a cleaned barrel. Now this is, I stress, let's not move it all back over there. That's very much for to be done with a whole heap of care. Your crown is the most important part of your barrel in the way of not damaging it whatsoever, and damaging it will cost you a fair bit in the way of repairing it. But it is something that in I suppose full disclosure, it is something that I do. And that's what I'll do when the back end is not moved whatsoever, particularly if I've got something in a full chassis type thing where where it's got a barrel guard over it, so I can't do anything else easily. No, I just want to wipe it through. I just want to put it back in the safe. I'm not trying to thoroughly clean it like that at all. It's something that is not scrubbing or that sort of stuff. It's just to give a wipe through just before I start shooting, or when it's just been laying around, the barrel and action have been together for a while, or whatever form that's in. But those are two things of get-arounds, which are doable, but they take a lot of care. But, and I suppose this is what I go into, the truth of it is, for most of my stuff, like I said, I don't tend to leave rifles together a lot. This is one that you've seen occasionally, because it is one of the ones that stays together. Most of mine are completely in pieces. There's one action that goes with 3 or 4 barrels. There's different chassis that run amongst them. The scopes are never bolted on. They're just in whether they're a barrel and action in a safe, or they're a barrel and an action separately in safes. So I'm bolting them in together all the time. So it does move into then where it's not something that I've tried to consider too much. What would I do in the problem I've got where the rifle is together? It is like most people, you've got 2 or 3 or 1 or 5, whatever it is, target rifles or whatever they are, competition rifles, and they're in the safe, but you want to clean it properly. You're one of the guys who wants to clean it properly. So then it moves into where I don't want to have any of this stuff down the back here. Mine, it's not adjustable stock. I don't really want to move that butt pad up because I need to be able to clean it properly, which I've heard several times. I need to be able to clean it properly. So I need all this stuff out of the road. How do I do that? I know that all this stuff out of the road, so I can get straight access with my cleaning system. So they'll have a proper tube to go in the back here. So you have a proper cleaning tube and go through and flush it like that. So I understand the conversation. My point of that conversation would be, I still feel if you're cleaning it properly, and the only times I have cleaned things properly in the last probably 5 years is I do it different than that. Like that. That's how I clean a rifle when I have to clean it properly. I'll even pull the scope off, but you don't need to do that. What I really want to say about that is then obviously you have full access, you can put the tube in there, you can set it up properly, you put your cleaning tube in there, set it up, flush it out properly, have all the gunk go down on a tray, on rags underneath, wherever it is, clean the thing thoroughly like that. That works really properly. That works very well. And then basically bolt the thing back in. There is, I think, a general thought of I need to leave it all together so it shoots exactly where it did last time. If you bolt it back together at the same tensions, it'll shoot, and make sure that that you pull the thing back onto as you bolt it back together. So you end up where you're sitting on your recoil lug properly. When you bolt it back together, it will shoot just the same, in the way of the same thing as when you've done a thorough clean. You need to do some fouling shots anyway. If there is any slight differences on the bolt together, it'll happen in that moment. The fear of, or I don't quite know why it is, this is not the obvious way to do things, in the way of putting all your solvents and all the bits and pieces you want to do through properly, there still is going to be a certain amount of spillage. You can clean things around your trigger, do everything thoroughly, and all of a sudden your buttstock, the shape of your buttstock doesn't matter at all. The only place this has some relevance is when you have barrel guards, or the likes of my bipod system that wraps around the barrel. That is no real problem either. I've done that, and once again, not something I do at all with any regularness, but simply lifted the bits and pieces to be able to undo the fore end so it stays around the barrel. I tend to put some rag either end so it's not rubbing on the barrel, that sort of stuff, and do the same thing. Or just lift it up and extend it up where it's outside of the chassis, a piece of wood sitting on the top of the chassis here, so that when you've just got a hoop around the front and get to it, you clean it. But for the most of the people I'm talking that when I see their rifles, we're talking about something, this is not a complicated thing to do to lift it out. The thorough cleaning, I understand that process, the target shooting process, that means you always start at exactly the same place. So you want a perfectly clean barrel, do some fouling shots, then do that day of shooting, then do that round, go to a perfectly clean barrel is where you're going to start from. I very much understand. I don't really understand the leaving it all bolted together. Then taking it out, putting it in a rack, putting it in something that can hold it properly, clean it properly, flush it properly, and bolt it back in makes a lot more sense to me and how I would do things. The process, the fear of it's not going to be consistent, it might take this amount of shots to settle down. Listen, it's not a case. Like I said, the stuff you see out of what I do, generally the rifle's just all been bolted together again, and then it'll be pulled apart into all those pieces just afterwards. So it might be 1 month and it might be 12 months prior when I get to shoot the thing again, and we bolt it back together. And really, if there is any settling, it happens in those first 3 or 4 shots that you're doing, 10 shots at the worst, but really 3 or 4 shots, your normal fouling shots you're going to do in a competition side of things. If, of course, it really is a case of it needs to go out and do a cold bore because it is a working rifle, then fully cleaning it doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all. Leaving it in that fouled form, if nothing else, a little wipe through, I would tend to suggest in that form, leaving it completely. The cold bore is what matters. I don't touch anything whatsoever. It might be different in your extremely dusty conditions or in your extremely moist conditions, and you need to do something, but then there's other 2 ways to deal with things. So just something to consider. Certainly the fear of, wait a minute, I'll just do a speed up and we'll put this back together. Okay, all back together, fully cleaned. Yes, you'd normally use a torque wrench on to do this. This is demonstration purpose, your torque wrench on there, or use your torque wrench fingers if you've got those. But that simple process will go back, and that is going to shoot exactly the same as it did if I hadn't pulled it down. That's something for you to experience yourself, but it really isn't a complicated thing to pull to pieces. It saves putting the solvent and bits and pieces that ultimately ends up going there regardless of the system. You end up with a certain amount of it, even if it's just when you're trying to pull a thing out, pull the tube, your cleaning tube out. But to be able to do it like that, bolt it in and out, and then have that buttstock in whatever form it is for you, but in what I always run to get that line of push to where my shoulder, my collarbone can be sitting here. The rifles shoot nicer simply because of that. And obviously heavy rifles and things, it's less obvious, but I've always found if you can get it up to that place, then you find the rifles settle down. I've always found groups have settled down, everything gets better. But listen, it's just a suggestion. Probably it's something I've balked on a little bit saying because it is not how I don't do a lot of that. I pull into pieces and put them back together all the time. I don't do a lot of the cleaning is what I should say. But anyway, just some food for thought for those guys who would like to try it. It's certainly, I believe in setting up your buttstock a lot is very important. And if cleaning it is what you're setting it up for, maybe getting used to pulling apart a couple of bolts and pulling it out mightn't be a terrible thing. You can even go further with your cleaning type of thing for the OCD guys that need to make sure everything is clean everywhere. Then certainly pulling it out and making sure everything's clean in there and make sure there's no grot and grime in the barrel lug or the the recoil lug and around your trigger and that sort of stuff. There's some extra stuff for you to clean there as well. Anyway, guys, just a quick one. Hope it makes some sense. Hope it helps. Thanks very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.